Welcome back to Questing Beast. I'm Ben. Today we're looking at Halls of the Blood King. This is an adventure for Old School Essentials created by Diogo Nogueira, whose work I have looked at in the past. I've mostly looked at his rule sets, things like Sharp Swords and Sinister Spells. But here he is writing an adventure for OSE, and this recently won the ENnie Award for Best Adventure. So great job, Diogo. Here's the back of our book. So you are invading, or perhaps you are summoned to the Halls of the Blood King, a sort of ancestral vampire who has popped into your world from realms unknown. Because this castle just appears out of nowhere, it makes it really easy to drop into whatever campaign you want. It's designed for 3rd to 5th levels. Probably make a really good Halloween one-shot if you wanted to run something like that. Before we get started though, quick shout out to today's sponsor. This episode is brought to you by Crown of the Oathbreaker, a 5e sandbox adventure campaign that takes you on a journey across the plains. You'll get to explore the Fey Realm, the Shadow Realm, and even Hell on your quest to break a curse plaguing the kingdom. It contains 5 large sandbox maps with over 100 locations on each, 27 dungeon maps, 36 new subclasses for players, over 130 NPCs, 34 new magic items, and much, much more. It's currently funding on Indiegogo, so click the link in the description below to go check it out for yourself. All right, let's take a look at what we get inside this adventure. Great cover art right here. All of the printing is being done by Necrotic Gnome, Gavin Norman over at Old School Essentials, and it's really nice as usual. We have really nice paper quality. All of the inside covers are being used. We have a map of the first floor, second floor, the dungeon, and the blood spider court, and everything is labeled with numbers. We have where the main NPCs are, where you can have encounters. Those are all done in red. Secret doors are done in blue. I think the only one is right here. And locked doors are done in L, so that makes it pretty easy to read. I think that one improvement could be to put room numbers on stuff, just to make getting a sense of the adventure a little bit faster. And on the back covers, we have some random happenings and vampire traits. These are things you're going to have to refer to a lot. There's a lot of vampires in here, so just being able to see what the vampires have, that's a nice touch to put that there. And of course, a random table. In most old school games, you roll a random encounter on a d6 once every 2 turns. This has it being a 1 in 6 every 1 turn, but you only actually run into things on a 7 and up. So it basically works out to being the same thing. But you can also have this, the first 6 results here are more atmospheric things that could show up. I like that that tweak to the rules there. We've seen that done a couple of times in Old School Essentials adventures. All of the illustrations are done by Justine Jones, and they're really remarkable. They're really fun. I don't know where Gavin finds these people, but it's excellent work. A general overview starts us off with the main NPCs that you're going to be running into. Celiana Suantis, who is a vampire hunter that you can encounter in here. The Princess of Blood, who's not really the Princess of Blood, but she's being forced to play that role and she resents it, and she kind of wants to take over the castle. And Lord Demetrius, who doesn't want to be a vampire anymore. He wants to end this misery. We have a number of different factions, some of them led by these NPCs over here, so that you do have real faction play going on. By exploring the dungeon carefully and by using more diplomacy than combat, you can make allies and gain a lot of advantages. It does point out that this is a old school adventure, so that means that things are not necessarily balanced. If you just go in guns blazing, so to speak, there are things in here, like the Vampire King himself, who can easily take you out. So you gotta watch your step. We have a number of different hooks that can be used for getting your players involved. For example, Celiana's Vengeance. That's the vampire hunter that is now trapped inside the castle. One of the PCs is actually this person's revenge-seeking descendant, or her descendant hired the PCs to enact vengeance and recover the body. Some unanswered mysteries. I like how this book doesn't answer every single thing. Getting into super detail on all the backstory can really bog the text of an adventure down. So there's some things that aren't fully fleshed out, but it leaves these little openings that you can hook into your adventure, or you can come up with explanations yourself. A number of different rumors here, some of which are true, some of which are only partially true. For example, mortals who drink vampiric blood gain their wretched undead strength. It's partially true. And things that could be outright false, like cats fascinate the Blood King. If you present himself with a cat, he treats you well. I like how all the treasure that you can find in the adventure is listed right here. So you can, I guess you could roll it up if you really wanted to get a random treasure, but it tells you what area they are all found in and how much they're worth, the total amount of treasure that can be found here. That's really nice. And it's important in an old school adventure because gold does translate into experience points. How to run a vampire. Vampires can drain levels, at least that's how they classically work, but there are alternatives to that if that is a little extreme for you. How to put pressure on the players. Things get worse over time. I really do like environments that are like that. And we start getting into the room descriptions. Again, the art, absolutely fabulous. The art doesn't always really match the descriptions. They're very much more ornate. They're more detailed. They're leaning into the aesthetic sensibilities of the artist. And you know what? I'm really okay with that just because it gets your imagination boiling and it gets you into the headspace instead of having these sort of perfect one-to-one renditions. As we've seen in previous old school essentials adventures like Winter's Daughter, layout is really nice. It's done in this bullet point style using bolding and using these little parentheses for more details so that when you go into a place, you immediately know what to tell your players. You know the most important stuff, and then you know what to describe as they get closer and as they investigate. So for example, the vine fence is a 12-foot tall barbed fence, but then if they want to get closer, it's rusty iron, it's lacquered with dried brown blood. All the different locations have a little mini map somewhere that zooms in on the big map from the beginning. So that allows you to not have to flip back very much because usually what you need to know is right there. We have shadow hounds. So it's dark as night and reflects no light. So like little black holes in the universe shaped like dogs. It's not exactly what this looks like, but I like the art so much, I don't really care. This is the main area that you'll be exploring, the main floor of the Vampire King's castle. We have this big room here. This is the throne room, and we have a dining room where horrible things are being served. We have little guard stations here. We have a banshee mother who might be the mother of the Blood King. Not totally spelled out, but she probably is. We have like a little forest over here that's inside that you can explore, a number of little bedrooms and things like that. The one criticism I think that would have here where it stretches disbelief a little bit is that you have multiple factions in here, some of which are aware of each other, some of which are not aware of each other, but they're all in this very tiny area, right? Each of these squares is probably 5 feet. I guess in some old school adventures, it's 10 feet. But you have like a faction that's hanging out in this room, or perhaps in this room over here, and they're just not aware of each other, but they're like, 50 feet down the hall. So this is an ancient Blood King's castle. It's been around for thousands of years. It becomes a little bit silly when all of these factions that have different motivations don't know each other exist or haven't eliminated each other, at least by this point. That sort of thing is easier to be okay with if you're in an underground dungeon adventure, just because there's this aura of the mythic underworld where there's a kind of a dream logic there. But this castle feels a lot more practical. It's like a worked out space that has politics, and there's reasons for why all the rooms are there. So it becomes a little bit strange. You can talk to the Banshee, perhaps make an ally of her. Monstrous doors. So I love how, like in these illustrations, for example, the scale is way bigger than you would actually find on the dungeon map. But just this image evokes this sense of like terror and awe and weirdness that I think you can use to infect the game as you're running it, just by describing it using these pictures as inspiration. We have the Great Hall that can be full of all sorts of weird vampires that are being summoned from this world to talk to the Vampire King and pay their dues. And we have descriptions of them over here. So I guess you can mix and match or just read right across. So for example, we might have Dartia Scaleblood, a humanoid fish with antenna and pale skin. Personality is aloof. Secret, considering becoming a vegetarian vampire. So you can very quickly know what the characters want. And if your players are wandering around talking to all these weird vampires, you know how to run them. We have a library you can explore. It is full of a whole bunch of YA vampire fiction. A games room. I love little tongue-in-cheek stuff like this. There is a ghostly game master that will run games for you. So if you want to start D&D inside of D&D, I guess that's a possibility. A kitchen and a pantry. All sorts of horrific scenes of people that have been kidnapped, locked in these cages, and are being butchered for meat by the vampires. Beneath the castle, down below, there is a blood spider court, which is kind of a weird mirror image of what's going on above them, where they have their own king and their own vassals. And you can use them to your advantage if you figure out what they want. But if you tell them that you're with the wrong faction, if you tell them that you're on the wrong side, they will betray you and come after you later. Baths of blood, one of which is full of this horrific, it's kind of like The Thing, like the John Carpenter movie, full of like eyes and tendrils and blood, and it gloops around and tries to absorb you into itself if you jump in the wrong bathtub. We have the vampire hunter here itself. She looks a lot like, I'm getting like Yoshitaka Amano vibes. Getting kind of like ornate anime look. And if we want to go upstairs, we can actually get to the Vampire King's study itself eventually. This is the Princess of Blood. And so she has her own plans to take over the place. And she is allying herself with Lord Demetrius, who has his own reasons for wanting to be eliminated. There are some slight inconsistencies here, so that I couldn't quite figure out while I was reading it. For example, his description reads that he is worried and has a tense expression, unwillingly helping the princess and would rather simply escape. But right here it says the reaction is submissive to the Princess of Blood, and her he sees his last chance of escaping his cursed life. So both of those things are right next to each other, and they seem like they're in contradiction. So I was a little confused by that. It'd be nice to have that cleared up. When we get up to the second floor, this is where the Blood King has his personal quarters. There's a number of weird things to interact with. For example, there's this magical telescope. When you look through it, you can point it at nearby planets, and you get to see what's going on there as if you were there and relive events from the past. So you can get a little bit of the Blood King's back history if you want to do something like that. Reminds me a bit of an artifact that I think was in Tower of the Stargazer by LOTFP. So this could be a callback to that, but having telescopes in general is really fun. You can take it with you. It's really cumbersome, but if you drag it all the way out back to your hometown, you could use it for all sorts of weird reasons. We have a carnivorous plant that you can talk to or deal with. It releases pheromones, so watch out for those. Again, I love how there's all these little mini maps on each of these pages, so you never really have to flip off of them. That is a nice touch, even though this one does have a lot of blank space around it. The Blood King studio himself, full of bizarre landscapes and paintings. You can really loot this place for all it's worth. There was a lot of treasure in here if you're running a gold for XP campaign. This one has a really nice weird effect. You can feed a painting blood. So if 1d4 blood is fed to the painting, it animates and you can see the people and things within moving. Bathing the painting in blood and the Blood King's blood opens a portal to there for 1d6 turns. Excellent. I love it when you can mess around with artifacts and stranger stuff happens. The King's Hall itself, armored statues you can fight, and the actual King's Chambers full of illusory, beautiful people lounging around in opulence. The Blood King himself is a powerful vampire. Don't mess around with this guy. Players hopefully won't if they're smart. And in general, he is not interested in killing the players. He's more bothered by them and he'll send you out. But if you really provoke him, he will wipe the floor with you. He's like a vampire, but just with even more powerful abilities. His heart, of course, is being kept somewhere else. It's in the observatorium, which has this planetary model system with lots of little planets going around this D20-shaped star. And if you look really closely at the planets, you can see that they are, in fact, actual planets that seem to have real people on them, just in tiny miniatures. What's going on with that? It's not really explained. It's one of those mysteries in the book. If you crack open the star, you can find the Vampire King's heart, and if you kill it, then you can kill him permanently. This could, of course, start collapsing the dungeon. Inside the dungeon, you can find all sorts of prisoners being kept there, possibly for food at a later time, and Lord Demetrius, or an illusory version of him that has been kidnapped and has been taken over by this void fungus, a fungus from another dimension that really wants to take over Earth. And again, it's a kind of faction in a sense, because you can talk to it, especially if you get infected with the fungus. Might be a dangerous ally, though. Including the adventure. So it's an open-ended scenario, as this points out. There's many potential outcomes. You can walk in, decide what your own objectives are, and get out again, hopefully without dying. I love these location-based things. I love locations that you can drop into any campaign, which this definitely has. So this, I think, would be a lot of fun if you're running any sort of campaign and you want a spooky turn of events that you want to just pop up and have your players deal with. So that's it for Old School Essentials, New Adventure, Halls of the Blood King. Special thanks goes out today for our new subscribers over on Patreon, including Julian Catan, Jose, Adam Brogdon, Riley Leach, Jonathan Hastings, Pete Wilcox, and Four Ghosts. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. And thank you all for watching. I'll see you guys next time.